Thank you for joining us for Inspiration Hour. We host these every month, and it's our way to share our favorite learning leaders with the Desk Light community. And so we're just so grateful that you all have joined us today. Some of our past speakers have been Dr. Emily Harburg, the CEO of PairUp, and she shared a refreshing take on how we can use technology to strengthen human connection. And then we've also recently heard from Christian Long, the Chief Growth Officer at Think Learning Studio, and he shared how to spark curiosity to create aha moments anywhere. And we've recently started uploading these to YouTube, and we have 5 full subscribers right now. So if you want to follow us over on YouTube, we also share these over there, and we're working on having more of a presence over there to share ideas around learning. And then next month, we're going to be hearing from Sarah Elizabeth Eiffel. She's the founder and executive director of Academy for Global Citizenship. And we usually host these on the first Thursday of every month, but that one's actually going to be on the second Thursday on November 9th at 11 a.m. Central Time. So we hope you'll join us for that. And then also, if you ever have comments or questions during this Inspiration Hour, feel free to drop them into the comments section, and we'll try to save a little bit of time at the end for a Q&A. And then with that, I'll turn it over to our CEO at Desk Light, Erin Huizenga.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I'm excited to introduce you guys to Mike, because I've known Mike for a long time. And yeah, Mike, I think we originally met because you hired me to teach at Marwin, to teach a design class back in the day. And for those of you guys who don't know, Marwin is a really amazing school for kids in Chicago, from areas that aren't very well served in Chicago, and kids get on the train, CTA, and come and learn about art and lots of other kinds of things at this place. And so really cool. And I always admired Mike from even back then and his leadership at Marwin. And then he was at Chicago Architecture Foundation, doing some amazing work there to grow the program, which I'm sure he'll share a little bit about. And now he's at Hyde Park Art Center, and it sounds like he just finished he's almost done with his sabbatical there. And so he has this amazing career in arts leadership and understanding of equity in arts leadership and how to help kids grow into themselves through the arts. So yeah, Mike, I'm just really excited to hear from you and learn from you today. And with that, I'll hand it over to you. And as Sarah said, quickly, think about your questions throughout, and we can talk through those towards the end.
All right, it's great to be here. Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Sarah. It's such a lovely environment, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity. I'm going to be kind of jumping through a thread of sorts that has been carried, I would say, through my career, and I thought it would be helpful to share. Just so you know, I moved here from Canada. If you can see, this is a picture of me. It is a different country. That's very glad to meet you. And I just wanted to basically throw that out there because I did come here with a specific purpose, which was my Canadian media and film and televisions were all filled with American stuff growing up. And yet the Constitution, which I knew of gradually, seemed to sort of go against what I saw in the news and media on films and televisions. I really was interested to square that circle. So I moved here with the intention to kind of learn about, how messages are constructed here and how they're disseminated to the public and what it does to a country. So I studied communication as an undergrad at DePaul University in visual communication at School of the Art Institute. I subsequently taught at both those schools. I started my own nonprofit called Chicago Art Department, started teaching and running programs at Marwin, then the Architecture Foundation, as Erin said, Hyde Park Art Center, where I've been since 2011. So all the things I'm going to show are kind of like a part of that process. Also some video production I did with 01 Projects, a company I started with Nat Sodi to do video and design work for nonprofits, community-based groups, and museums here in Chicago. So with that, I'm going to get going. And I want to start with my practice, which is one of the things I wanted to do when I studied media here is like what happens when media is transmitted. And 3 weeks after September 11th, I made this video where I explored 24 hours of NBC Chicago.
Good morning, everybody. Matt, good morning to you. Good morning. Good morning, Katie. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Johnny.
Good afternoon.
Hello, I'm Martin Sheen.
Good evening.
Tom, good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone.
Hey. Hey, Dad.
Hey, Jack.
Hello, I'm Martin Sheen.
Hello. Hello.
Hey. Hi, everyone. Hi, guys. Hey.
Good evening.
So those were all the times that there was some sort of greetings or salutations inside of 24 hours. I literally recorded 24 hours on VHS tape. That's I used to do deck-to-deck analog video editing. So cataloging 24 hours just to try to kind of make messages, in my opinion, that were responding to the dominant ones that we had. So I was really starting to unpack what it meant to develop a voice in response to dominant ones that were out there. That practice continued where I really spent the next probably about 10 years re-editing. I really was interested in white maleness, so I did re-edit a lot of political speeches and television shows, movies to watch in different orders so that you really analyzed media in a different way. This is from a debate in 2007.
Presidential biographers are always looking. What's the principal difference, Senator Edwards?
Very small, but
Similar to John, I agree with everything.
I agree with John Edwards. Senator Obama represents change. Bill is exactly right. I think he's a wonderful guy. I think Joe is right.
Senator Clinton?
Joe is absolutely right.
Joe's point, and maybe the right one, Joe Biden has potential.
Senator Clinton has experience.
Joe is right.
Senator Dodd?
I agree with what Hillary has just said.
Chris is right.
As Chris said, similar to John, I agree.
Senator Edwards?
I think his view adds something.
That is he right or wrong?
But Senator Clinton's done a terrific job.
Congressman Kassinis?
Praying to God you were going to call on me.
Senator Gravel, do you agree with Governor Richardson?
And I disagree with Joe Biden, and I disagree with Hillary. Well, stop and think. Stop and think. Who are we going to nuke? Who are we going to fight?
Okay, Senator Gravel, thank you all very much. We'll see you.
So really, I'm looking for patterns in things. And in this case, back in the day, you might not remember this, has been so long, but like people used to agree on stuff. Coming out of September 11th, there used to be coordination when it came to, I would say, being civil. You know, it was a different culture at a different time. But these are things that I tried to identify in my own practice when I was kind of absorbing and digesting media. And it passed on to my teaching. When I started teaching at DePaul in the Art Institute, this was back, I was teaching Final Cut Pro 1, Photoshop 1. Like these were courses that didn't exist. And I was literally charged at DePaul to help launch their G4 Media Lab with Final Cut Pro 1. And my charge was like, we just need students to be into using this stuff. We've put a lot into this, let's get their voices going. So I designed a few programs where art and social interaction. I worked with Steve Harp at DePaul to have students make videos for nonprofits. And I had students question what it meant to be in front of a camera. I had students recreate scenes from a movie or a TV show so that they sort of like started to develop their own voices kind of along the same lines. And our first project out of the gate was working for Alvin Ailey Dance Camp, where we did the first documentation of one of their dance camps. And it was a summer project that we had, and we agreed to do it as long as we could make these little vignettes because we found the campers were so poetic and awesome. We wanted to do that. So here's one.
My hopes and dreams, they're not quite sane. Although I'm just a teen, time is going by very keen, and I would like to be seen. My hopes and dreams are to become a rapper, actor, and singer. When some people hear that, they point their finger. But when I'm a star, oh, I'll go far. While the people that pointed the finger are at the bar with no card. I can get down and have feeling when I'm willing. But when I'm on the wall of fame, I'll have no shame. While you'll be looking insane, that's the girl with the hopes and dreams.
So we had these videos kind of play when they'd had their giant performance in between dance numbers. And that sort of like activated the campers in a new way. And we felt like, you know, this public interaction was so critical, and it became a really important part of my practice and my teaching. So this is art and social interaction. DePaul students making a video about Inner Voice, which is a homeless organization helping homelessness in Chicago. Look at those computers. So the interesting thing about that, I remember the students being like, we don't want to show people in like down and out situation be stereotypical. So how can we visualize this? And it's like, well, can you shoot The Office? That was a fun one. And then I did a lot of work studying Jean-Luc Godard. A lot of my thesis work was around his existential TV work from the 70s for the French government. So I did this piece with students in video art who basically asked questions about what it meant to be in front of a camera.
How do you feel, even right now, being in front of the camera as opposed to behind it?
To be able to be yourself in front of the camera, I think is just the most incredible thing you can ask of someone.
I know Native Americans thought back in the day that whenever you took a picture of them, that you're stealing their soul away.
Well, I'm more nervous in front of the camera.
Well, behind it, it's just like it's an extension of my brain or my eye.
I feel a lot more comfortable behind the camera because when I'm in front of the camera, I don't have a lot of control.
I mean, behind the camera, you're the creator and you're the discoverer.
I have always been kind of a cheeseball, so I still like being in front of the camera better than behind it. What's the biggest difference? I guess is the control.
And so like students started to really kind of explore with me what this idea meant of like, what does it mean to be in front versus behind the camera? And in the background, you might have seen one of the interviewers was Brandon Bro, I taught it to Paul. Brandon Bro is an amazing artist who I've worked with subsequently as a resident at Chicago Art Department, as a resident at Hyde Park Art Center. We've collaborated a lot. And these are some of the early people that I just started to realize as you gave people real world experiences, you know, you started to develop relationships, and those extended beyond programs and into the real world. And some of those, many of those relationships have continued to this day, which has been a real treat for me to both keep myself growing, but also, you know, keep tabs on the work in the field. This is also a scene recreation. I'm actually going to just mute this, but this is Pharaoh Boyd, who's talking about how he loves when he sees something, he wants to recreate it. So way back in the day, Volkswagen had this commercial with the Jeff Lynne song. It was really popular, and he went after it shot for shot. And this was so demanding, it was crazy. But he made this whole split screen, all these like different, like literally matching it shot by shot. And what I found was like artists were really like motivated when they would see, you know what, I can do this. I can recreate what I'm seeing. And I didn't realize like that's within me. And one of the students that I work with in this class, Ben Chappell, we just reconnected this year because I wanted to see how he'd been doing. Turns out for the last 15 years, he's been the art director, photo, stage director, and made all the videos for this band Arctic Monkeys, which is like a really big band. And he was like in Bangkok. He's like, we're about to go on stage. I've been doing it for 15 years. And he's like, it's all thanks to your stupid video class. But it allowed people, I think, the chance to see themselves differently than in a student role and in the real world. When I taught graduate projects at the Art Institute, I really focused on advising students on their process, and I used design process. I wasn't going to make them a better Photoshopper or video person or sculptor. I wasn't going to formally focus on their skills as much as I was going to make them a better artist and better person. So this is Young Jin Park, who made this piece that got into Sundance right after September 11th, and he was kind of using old.
What we all must learn to do, you and you.
Be sure and remember what Bert the Turtle just did, friends, because every one of us must remember to do the same thing. That's what this film is all about. Duct tape and cover.
So it started to see my students really kind of playing out my practice in a way, in a way that was really inspiring to see, because they were in some cases like this, Youngjin's Park, like doing more than I'd never got into Sundance. I was like, how the hell did you do that? But they were really, I think, engaging. And remember, this is pre-internet. Like people weren't sharing the way we are now. You had to go to festivals at MCA and museums to see videos in person. You couldn't just like click on a button. So there was a culture around this, and I really wanted to be a part of that. And to see my students take it even further was fantastic. But again, all under the guise of kind of like responding to these dominant messages that we hear. Around the same time, I started doing work with Chicago History Museum and Teen Chicago. It was a one-year exhibition about being a teenager over the last 100 years in Chicago. And we worked with Lonnie Bunch, who ended up going to Smithsonian in Washington and running. I think he's the president of the world right now. I don't know. He does a lot. But we worked with Ray Yang and Maurice Katina and their youth council there to really explore what it meant to be a teenager over the last 100 years. And I'm going to play a quick clip of a video we made for the exhibition.
Some young people were alienated by these films. Definitely a difference in whether these films were.
I wasn't the total white bread American. I didn't look like that. But I saw these films. Everybody was a nice, normal white kid that lived in the suburbs. So that's kind of how I thought I was supposed to be.
If you think about it, like these people, all blonde, middle class, white, right? Okay, come on.
Fashion, language, and dating all became part of an emerging school-centered teen culture. And social guidance films reflected adult concerns about the
knows this, but Chicago used to be the Hollywood of social guidance films. Back in the day, there was like studios around here, and they would make all these films about how to be a teenager, how to be good, how to whatever, how to shower, like just all these random films that some of us who are old enough might remember. I barely remember, and even in Canada, seeing some. But you know, whatever, you would have these rolled in on a TV, and you would, or a film projector. So this exhibit was really eye-opening for me because I got to meet with so many community members around the city. Studs Terkel did a lot with him for a year, and just all these interviews around the different decades. And the exhibition was fantastic. And I've recently reconnected with Erica Griffin there, who's does learning at the History Museum, and we've been talking about this project. It's a really amazing one. And I subsequently also worked with, this was in 2007, I worked with the Election Collection. This is a media literacy conference that I put together for Cinema Chicago, and I worked with Schur's high school students. And what we did is we kind of taught them practices using old commercials, that presidential and campaign commercials that were made, excuse me. And we then would interview the teens, and we put together a program where they would, you'll see that we kind of made little campaigns for each teen if they were candidates, and we imagined them as candidates in the political spectrum. And I'll play this just quick.
You probably have a gay cousin or a gay father.
So we made these spots that were all like these kind of like fake commercials for them as presidential candidates, using existing footage or commercials. And we brought them all, they used them in their classrooms, but then we brought them all to a big event at Northwestern University downtown. And the funny thing is, when we screened all this for all the high school students, there was hundreds of them, they just ended up laughing through the whole thing. It was just like, I think which was probably fine, but it was a really engaging project. I worked with Naomi Klein and Video Data Bank, and I started to really crystallize this idea of how important youth voices are, not just for the future, but at that moment, to respond at a time when dominant voices had been really controlling our narratives and our media for so long. But we're at this point where like technology was coming along, and technology was now available for people to respond in ways that had only been in theory possible up until this point. So to be able to carry out some of these ideas, they would laugh because they're like, I can't believe that's us. And two, I can't believe we're doing this. It was just this weird time in history. And in 2009, after from 6 to 9, as Aaron pointed out, I went to Marwin to be their manager of studio programs. And I had spent so much time teaching and developing ideas for departments, for Chicago Art Department, for the Art Institute, for DePaul. At some point, I felt like, I guess I was in the circle of like, maybe I could be involved in running programs. And that's what happened at Marwin. Is I was lucky enough to get the position as Marwin Studio Programs Manager, and I curated their exhibitions for 3 years. I had a charge of overhauling their entire curriculum, developing an intro program called Sketching Marwin, which was a survey course that took students to all the studios before they went up the ladder, so to speak. And the capstone project that I launched in 2009 with Katie Rodriguez and Christian Ortiz, Angie Leonard, Jessica Vaughn, was a program called Marwin Lab Program, which is their capstone independent projects program. The idea there was to develop their voice with independent projects, meet with visitors like Dawood Bey and others that we got to come to the program, and they would culminate with a public exhibition. That was really critical, that they engage beyond the classroom with real world people professionals, that they engage with the public and they actually sort of carry out their ideas. And this is another kind of cohort of people I've just stayed connected with. Sam, who's at the bottom, runs programs in Buffalo for a museum out there. Rasia is a photographer in LA. Abby is working in the arts, and Jared Brown, who's in this program at this time in 2009, became a resident at Hyde Park Art Center, taught our youth art board at Hyde Park Art Center. This was 10 years later. And Alex Herrera, who's at Marwin at the time, now runs our teen programs at Hyde Park Art Center. So there's just been lots of fruits that came from that. Teachers I work with and artists like Maria Gaspar, William Estrada, Regina Gloria, all these amazing people that I worked with that now have kind of like carried through and gone on to do amazing things. But the lab program was really independent projects, and developing voices like this was really stemming from my practice and my interest in seeing more than a class or groups of people doing group things in traditional learning, developing these voices that interact with the public, and in some ways like raise issues and questions that need to be addressed. After I finished my 3 years of Marwin, finishing with the Marwin Lab program, I went to work for the Architecture Foundation, which I did love as well. I've been very fortunate. And one of the coolest projects I felt like I worked on there was with artist Norman Teague and a bunch of teenagers, where we visualized, we worked for a summer to basically visualize South Shore's history inside of an empty storefront. We worked with Tianda Wirtz in the Chamber of Commerce there. And what these kids did is they interviewed community members all summer. And they just gathered and gathered all this information. And then at the end of the summer, they put together this, with Norman's leadership, this storefront that visualized and turned into a tourist center. And the Architecture Foundation started their tours of that neighborhood that Chris Ann Rabine and Jen Mason-Garb were involved in leading. And they kept that up for years. It wasn't supposed to be up, but they kept it up for years. And this will just be kind of like a quick glimpse. Oh wait, can't the music. You don't need the music. But there's Norman in the middle, and these are a bunch of the teens that are visualizing all the work that they put together, boards and photos, stories, testimonials in this empty storefront. They learned how to construct and build and install. It's a really interesting project. And it was the first time I formally worked with Norman, who I then continued to work with as a resident Chicago Art Department, educator that I've worked with, curator, and in other ways, just an all-around amazing person. So far I've kind of talked a lot about like my practice and how it's morphed, from teaching into program work, my own personal work. All along, everything that I've done for the last 20 years has been something called Chicago Art Department. And this was our pilot program that was based on intermedia studies, and meaning the collision of voices. So what happens when you collide people in different backgrounds? So formally, what you're looking at is a bunch of students. We offered these classes free so that they could explore while we explored teaching, because we had got hired to teach and we didn't know how to teach. So we wanted to practice that. And so this was in response to the war in Iraq, our first program. And all these artists are making works that in some ways address topics that they feel are socially important at the time. One thing we all shared, myself included, not many of us, let's say, were from Chicago. I moved here from Montreal. Nat, the other co-founder, was from the East Coast and Western Illinois. Nathan was from Iowa. All the students you're seeing are from different countries around the world, different cities around the country. And I can say, looking back, there was a challenge that we faced, and none of us felt totally comfortable in the white cube environment, in the gallery environment here in Chicago. We didn't feel like it was easy to sort of envision ourselves inside of that. So we created our own cube, and this was the final exhibition for Sketching Intermedia, Love It or Leave It, which was the name of the program that we taught. And it really resonated with a lot of people, and that's where we started this idea of like, let's keep this going as programs. Let's make programs and opportunities for people to sort of question the world that we live in, to ask questions about our city and about our country and what we do. And so we moved on to other programs like street studies, which we collaborated with St. Xavier University, and the artists from St. Xavier explored north-south streets, and our CAD artist explored east-west streets, and they explored histories, made art around them. And then they had intersection projects where students would meet on corners where their streets would would cross. And we just started to unpack how you could be creative about, investigating our culture. This was made by an artist named Chris Hales. Subsequently, Chris started teaching for us. We had a lot of students who would take our classes, eventually wanted to teach. They taught. Eventually, when they would teach, they would ask for more. In 2008, 2009, we developed a residency program, which is the core aspect of what we do at CAD now to this day. Another example, before the internet, before I can do more on my phone now than I could do in my entire studio back then, but this was something called CAD TV, where we used to do analog TV shows using like DV cameras, capturing to HD, not HD, DV tapes, mini DV tapes, mixing live. This was with Ed Marchowski, who many of you know runs Co-Prosperity Sphere, Lumpen Radio, Mars, Kimski, Maria's Packaged Good, an entire cultural empire in Bridgeport that's incredible. This was him early on. We did some work with him.
The sound isn't coming through too much on this one, Mike.
Oh, it isn't? Okay, that's fine. Well, anyway, this one I just wanted to point out because we would use this as both a learning tool. Our students would learn how we would produce something like this. They would be involved in those aspects, but then they would also connect to, people in the field. And Edmar was certainly, and still is certainly, an amazing person to connect with. One of our earliest programs that relates to a lot of my current work was called Photo Projects. And the interesting model here was that students had to propose a photo program. They had 15 weeks to develop a project, and visiting professionals would come in and they would have an exhibition at the end. And the tuition model was, it was $150, and you see Tim at the bottom ripping up his check, because if you finished the program, we ripped up your check. And if you didn't, we'd cash the check. And we didn't make any money at that program. But that's okay. We saw some value there in kind of accessibility and continuing to be accessible. So we did that. iPhone, therefore, our iArt was the name of our first mobile exhibition with mobile artists from around the world. We had about 40 artists from Chicago mixed with artists from around the world. And this was in 2009, before nobody had really explored this as a tool. And we thought it would be an interesting way to both explore the formal side of what the tool could do, but also the cultural side of like, who could afford the phone? Who could use the phone? And it got a lot of attention. New York Times did an article about it. It's on CBS Evening News. This was can you hear this? A little bit?
There's a new exhibit showing one of the first shows of its kind on the planet. If you look back through history, there's always been different moments that have different tools. And this show really set out to explore that. Is that possible for the iPhone? We're trying to figure that out.
I did these little prints utilizing cats and glitches. The two apps I used, one was this hilarious app that that's called Cat Paint, and it allows you to paint with a cat.
All right, so you get the idea. But it was really interesting because not only was it playful, this is John Satcham. I worked with him, Marwin. Aaron, you might remember John. He was awesome. But it was also like envisioning it inside of the gallery environment. So we had limos of people pulling up for our opening that were all, it was the funniest thing. But it was a new way we saw of like exploring a tool to generate some conversations. We loved that. And then around the second chapter of CAD, we started working with more and more community members. And one of them was Diaspora Rhythms and Patrick McCoy, where our artists spent a year curating an exhibition called South by Near South. 5 artists from Diaspora Rhythms organization. And if you don't know Diaspora Rhythms and Patrick McCoy, it's an amazing organization on the South Side. Patrick's based out of there. I'm just going to play this in the background while I tell you. It's an organization of about 60 or 70 collectors that represent about 500 different artists who all speak to the African diaspora, and through their art kind of raise issues of equity and accessibility here in Chicago, and certainly history. Patrick and I really connected. This was in 2013, and we've stayed pretty close since. He joined CAD's board. We've done a lot together at both the Art Center and around the city. Just as recently as this past year, where I got a CAD and Art Center people to meet at his exhibition, Wrightwood 659, called Take My Picture. Amazing organization in person, and our artists in the process got to learn so much from working with them, that we started thinking about partnering a little bit differently. And there was Paul Klein, who I got to interview for this as well. If you don't know Paul, he's a really incredible Chicago historical figure, unfortunately no longer with us. Amanda Williams, you might know, we crossed paths because Amanda was in the center program, which I lead at the Art Center. Her project, Colored Theory, was actually her center program final in 2014, I believe. She ended up having her first solo show at Chicago Art Department. 2015, we honored her at our Crystal Ball the year after. And to this day, Amanda actually has her studio at Chicago Art Department. She's what we call our collab artist. So we have a few artists who are professionals working in the field. They don't participate in our programs, but just by being around, they really help sort of influence and inspire others. And this was, we honored Amanda as part of our Crystal Ball fundraiser. And with her mom, we celebrated her and her mom, Edith, because it was Mother's Day and it was called Make Mama Proud, the theme was.
Yeah, and the guy comes good. I'm Amanda Williams. I'm a visual artist. And I'm Edie Williams. I'm Amanda's mother.
So we didn't just highlight Amanda, we wanted to highlight her mom as well, and the creation of that her mom made, which was Amanda, right? And so moms were celebrated that day and that year, and in part it was close to me because unfortunately that was the time that I lost my mom. So we really felt it would be a great time for me, honestly, to even just kind of lean into that a little bit. Amanda's been a friend, a colleague, and somebody I've just enjoyed following immensely. If you don't know her work, I'd be shocked, but you should. Most recently, I think last year, she won, maybe 2 years ago, she won the MacArthur Genius Award, or one of them. And it was incredible. It was the first time I've had some artists and students go on and do great things, but Amanda developed an amazing project, and her career took off after doing the center program. And for her to win a Genius Award, I've had people ask me, is that cool for you to have a former student like win that? And I'm like, hell yeah, are you kidding me? It's incredible. I don't know what it means, but I don't know. There's something there, and I'm really thankful for her. And after a long time, in case I didn't spell this out, I was CAD's executive director up until end of 2021. I basically volunteered as an executive director for about 17 years. And over the last 5 to 6 years, I asked the board to plan and work towards new staff being hired. And we hired Karis Adams Carlos Flores in 2018. We have two staff today. Carlos is actually our program manager, working with Vivian Haritos, who runs our development, and they have paid benefits, health benefits, and it's really kind of an amazing ride to be at that point. But now I moved to the board, and they voted me chair of the board, which I'm still learning how to do. And just a couple last projects I want to point out, because this is one of the last project I might have been involved with directly at CAD. Really fascinating. Carlos, who I worked with in center program and helped to carry this project out as program manager. We really wanted, inside of the pandemic, to focus on some neighborhood issues that we felt were bubbling up for us. One, Dorian Sylvain is an artist from South Shore I've worked with in a few capacities in center program and others. Incredible artist. And Pablo Serrano is a mural artist also from Pilsen. So we had these two neighborhoods explore each other in this program, Seeds in My Pocket. So Dorian and Pablo each curated groups of artists from each neighborhood, and they came together and explored things and made an exhibition about it.
Really at both communities, one of the things that I recognize, I think I'd mentioned the idea of segregation in that last question. And one of the things that I've recognized is that really both of our communities, being the Black community or the Mexican community, Latinx, we really, in the context of a racist society, were considered undesirables. Understanding in the 60s, that's when things started to shift a little in terms of the city dynamics and where people could live. And so part of my experience growing up in the 60s was the idea of white flight. Just as Black folks started to move into South Shore, white folks started to leave. They're like, okay, you got it, you can have it, And so I think Pilsen similarly went through that transition even though there are certain dynamics psychologically of feeling unwanted, growing up in neighborhoods, we feel like people are leaving because we're here now, that we're so undesirable that they're all leaving. But despite all that, what really grew out of it was an opportunity to promote your own culture. And that's what we built, with the neighborhood. I believe that those are some of the commonalities between Pilsen and South Shore, is that we made it ours.
I loved this project, and Pablo was amazing too. And to have these artists come together and share histories about their neighborhoods and commonalities, look for commonalities. It's morphed into an annual project now. Carlos leads in different capacities, worked with different neighbors, North Lawndale, Little Village, just highlighting and working with people like Sam Kirk and really amazing artists and locals to try to heighten this uniquely Chicago quality of like neighborhoods, right? And Chicago Art Department today is really incredible for me to see.
It helps a lot of local artists.
It is a place for me to make my work, to think more broadly and also work more broadly.
And it became this safe space for a lot of us to connect with other artists.
A space where I can truly be myself and be welcomed for who I am and what I bring to the table.
We exchange ideas, we exchange materials.
Not just artists, like people from around the neighborhood, people from around the city that just love to hear the creative voice at work.
So, I mean, CAD has really morphed into something beyond what I might have envisioned or we might have envisioned. But it's beautiful to see. It's great to see. Every day, it seems like there's a new voice coming out and speaking. And our mission remains to really support artists who question the city that we live in. So a lot of the programming and things that you might see about Chicago Art Department really center around that in different capacities, different artists who do that in different ways. So you might be getting an email from me later about, or at some point about support. I'm still learning how to be a board. I'm learning how to be a board chair because I don't know how to be a board chair. So people are trying to help me. All right, I showed that. Sylvia Gonzalez was in the last video. You see her at the bottom here. This is a beautiful thing. She was in Marwin when I worked at Marwin. She was in the first exhibition Marwin had offsite at Chicago Art Department. We kept in touch. She became a resident, and now she's leading Center Program, which is a capstone program that I designed at the Art Center and led. And now it's 10th class as a professional development program for working artists here in Chicago. It's incredible for me to see Sylvia grow into what she has grown into. And at this point, for her to come back together to connect CAD as a resident and her practice to the Art Center and Center Program, where we've worked now with over 200 artists. We've had over 50 different visiting professionals like Charles Race, Theaster Gates, Dawood Bey, just incredible people up and down. I've been so fortunate, but to see it all sort of like come together has just been an incredible experience for me. I'm going to keep going there, Sylvia, again. And if you do know working artists looking for development, we had to develop other programs. So we have a bridge program, which is a shorter version of Center Program, also independent projects, also with visiting artists, also with an ending showcase and exhibition, engaging the public. And we also have New Edition, and New Edition is for people who have already taken those programs, but they want to take more, and we don't have them. We offer New Edition once every blue moon, and that's a program where artists have to develop their practice and mission of their practice inside of new materials. And then they exhibit their new material works alongside previous works, and they can see that continuing thread across different media. And I'll just end with teens at the Art Center, because teens have been like a really important part of my work, as you might gather. They've been sort of like both fuel for me, fire for me, certainly stuff that I never would have planned on doing. They've been muralists like this one at Kenwood Academy, where they traced community members onto a wall, silhouettes of community members onto a wall after the school itself was whitewashed, and began community conversations around what it means to displace and get rid of histories. This is an early program where at the Art Center we have both community and independent projects. and they've done amazing works. And this is just a quick video of what they would start with in Youth Art Board, working with Lamont Hamilton.
Whenever you're ready. All right, got you. Babies killing babies, but that reality doesn't faze me.
Well, whose reality doesn't?
What if the babies were just adults?
How could babies kill babies if they only babies?
Everyone started out as a baby.
But I grew up too fast. Did I grow up at all? I'm researching for ourselves.
And if I found who I am, do I really know that's true?
The truth lies with the truth. Define adulthood.
That society killed my child. I never grew up.
I'm still growing up. I'm a kid. Right, man.
So the interesting thing about this, I'm just going to mute it and play again, is that this is Noah. Noah ended up working for us eventually, helping in our different programs, photo programs for teens. This is Lamont, who's the lead and is exhibiting right now around the country. It's beautiful. Felton Kaiser, who started his own coffee company and magazine. We have coming up, hold on. Gerald, who went to Syracuse, came back and spoke at the Art Center's gala. Does amazing work with Sisters in Clay in Philadelphia, an organization she started. This is Stephanie, and Maria got a full ride to the Art Institute. And then Jordan also got a scholarship to the Art Institute. Asia worked for us this past summer. This is Jenna. She was our camp coordinator 3 years ago. Dante writes for Hyde Park Herald and ESPN. And it's just incredible, the stories. And 3 or 4 of them ended up coming back and working for us later. And it's because, again, I think the relationships were developed beyond the classroom, like something meaningful beyond the classroom really helped internalize this intrinsic connection to the Art Center. The teens developed their own projects like this Chicago Teen Portrait Project, where they did 4x5 portraits of teens from other programs. They worked with Lamont and Avery R. Young. They took all these portraits from our other programs around the city, and then Avery and teens made 3-word poems in response to all these images. They made 6 or 7 different murals like this around the city. This is Hyde Park Art Center. I helped wheat paste a lot of this, which I probably shouldn't have, but we probably, whatever. And then I just saw in looking this up, and I'm trying to find this content. Somebody in George Washington High School here in Chicago ended up doing a whole project inspired by this. I didn't even know that. It's just incredible to see that. And today our teen programs have like community projects, independent projects, some formal learning. They do equity learning. They have an equity team with our board members at the Art Center. So they actually have equity meetings with our board members, and they get to express their concerns around representation and the culture of our community. Alex Herrera, who runs our teen programs now, you see her here with Chance the Rapper. She won the Brother Mike Award last year as a mentor, which is incredible to see. I'm so thankful for Alex. Alex was a student, again, at Marwin years ago, now leading our programs. And the Brother Mike Award is so cool because Brother Mike Hawkins, if you ever knew him, was an amazing educator and mentor for a lot of people, including Chance the Rapper's mentor. And Brother Mike was actually part of our learning think tank at Chicago Art Department. He would meet with us regularly to discuss learning, have important conversations around like how to improve our approaches, whatever. We would just share shit. And this was his only exhibition he ever had, was he showed his work at Chicago Art Department. That's his typewriter, this is his poems, this is his thinking behind the importance of revolution. Just an amazing person, and we miss him dearly to this day. And last thing, just so you know, I didn't talk at all this, but I curate too. This is a curated exhibition called Fugitive Narratives, where I explored with abstract artists what the stories were behind their abstractions. And I love curating shows. I wish I had more time to do it. And if you haven't, I have to do this. We did so much work over the last 10 years at Hyde Park Art Center to launch what's called Open Arts. And Open Arts means, let me just scroll down here, see if you can read this. We did a huge campaign. So in the tuition-based model that had traditionally been tuition-based for people to take classes, we now have Open Arts, which means people can choose to pay what they want for our classes at the Art Center, including nothing. So of all the different types of community members we have and different access points that people have, It's incredible to be able to build off of what we saw with our teams and what happens when you make things free. What we saw with Center Program, what happens when you have scholarships and financial aid and opportunities to get people of different voices into a program. All of the programs that I'm talking about rely on variety. Center Program in particular, the strength is the variety. We literally had a stage in our review process that would say, do we have any one group overrepresented here? Do we have any one institution overrepresented? Do we have too many MFAs, too many SAICs, too many PhDs, too many never went to schools? The strength of the program is variety, because what they have to do in the end is center themselves inside of a larger conversation, learn to communicate with people that don't necessarily think the way they think. And what the result is, as people launch, they just learn, and they learn how to launch with new voices and new audiences. And in the process, you might have picked up with all this, like, I'm just the luckiest guy in the world. I get to hang out with artists every day. I get to learn from them and hopefully help them, but really just hopefully help make a difference in the world as much as make items. So I'm going to stop there, and I hope this was I hope this was okay.
Oh, it was fantastic, Mike. It was so fun and so inspiring to see the portfolio of your work and hear you talk about it. I also love that you went around the circle again and talked about where all of those students are now. That was really profound. So thanks for doing that.
I could go forever. It's crazy.
Yeah, I love it. I have a lot of questions. I'll start with one and then pass it over to others that have questions. But I loved that you talked about, empowering the students with their process, not trying to make them necessarily a better artist, but a better person, and helping them with their process. So I wonder if you could talk more about that. Like, how do you do that? How do you think about doing that when you teach?
Yeah, so and I did it for two reasons. One, with grad students, what I would do is I would introduce a design process. I would say, okay, we got a semester. You're going to have 15 weeks. I want you to first propose your process. This is your class. I'm teaching, but it's your class. So what does your process look like for the 15 weeks? They would envision what they would be working on, when they would meet certain benchmarks. And then throughout the semester, and at the end especially, we would reflect back on how things went and what did or didn't reach their goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that way, by the end of the semester, they would be like, oh yeah, I could get better at this. I'm not good at that. I'm procrastinate when it comes to this part of it. So the next semester I would work, okay, what did we learn last time? How is it going to be different this time, right? So on a practical level, you just try to like make them better that way, right? I think I'm forgetting the second side of that, but really it was about kind of getting them to kind of just reflect on their process. I'm sorry, I'm losing my train.
No, that's great. Well, and I love putting them in the center of co-creating what that looks like too, right? As you're saying. So that's great, because then automatically they have more intrinsic motivation to do it.
Yeah.
To be part of that. Mm-hmm.
Well, I always used to feel like with these independent project programs, it's like you're not teaching one class, you're teaching like 15 or 20, right? And so you just have to be your attention is a little bit different. But in a good way. Yeah. If I remember that second part, I'm gonna throw it out.
Cool. Pass it over to anybody else who has a question. I have a few more, but anybody else want to jump in?
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
I'm sorry, I was able to join only after you started. I was having trouble with my computer, and but I didn't miss much. I am very grateful for this space. I am in awe of the work you've done. I really want to celebrate you and acknowledge you for that. And I really connect with any community nurturing dynamic effort, because I think that is what the world needs the most. So my question is, because the idea of the artist is, these, of course, archetypical, but a special genius touch, soul by some sort of extraordinary creativity or connection to some type of thing, and it brings in the individualistic frame. So the artist is a chosen one, so to speak, and at the same time here you are striving to build community for artists by artists. And I wonder if you have ever touched the topic with them and created the conversation on how these two poles interact, and what is your approach or your understanding or theirs?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think I've been in situations over the years where perhaps there's an artist who comes in with a strong formal skill set and maybe some beautiful items that they make or works that they've done. And in many cases, formally, you might look at that work and be like, wow, it's genius, incredible, right? Like traditionally, we'd be like, this person needs to be in a museum, just looking at a piece of something without knowing what's actually behind it, right? And so in a lot of cases, I've been in discussions with those artists, not so much about what they're making, but why they're making it. That's kind of like the question that I tend to push people a little bit more on, is like, I'm less interested in what you make. In fact, I've actually told a lot of artists this, and I'm just like, I'm kind of like not very interested in what you make. I'm more interested in why you're making it. I'm more interested in is you as the piece of art. Like, forget about the items, just like, look at you. How do you feel different after you make this? How do you change from making this? So I've challenged artists, and Amanda Williams was one of them early on when in the center program. She came in to propose her project as like basically a continuation of a map project she had been doing. Good work, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't challenging. It wasn't moving her. It wasn't. So we literally sat down. I was like, you can't do this. You have to do something else. You have to do something that meets the moment. And that's where she ended up working with the group and us. And Trisha Van Eck was the curator that year, and she developed her colored theory project, and that was her project in center program. So it's really just trying to push for the whys more than the whats, for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm curious. I love all of the things that you mentioned. I love hearing Studs Turkle in any conversation at any point of the day.
Studs was awesome. By the way, I had to ask him why he was always wearing the red and white shirt. Every time I met with him, every time I did an interview, he was always wearing a red and white checkered shirt every time. And at some point I was like, Studs, why are you always wearing the same shirt? And he's like, because I don't have time to think about other stuff.
Hey, he was the Mark Zuckerberg or whatever
right?
Before. Yeah. That's hilarious. And so much of your work in like experiential learning really resonates with me and like what I've done in my career before Desklight. And the thing about what you mentioned around, and all of my work was kind of outside of the school. Like we had relationships with schools, but it was always outside of the school, in nonprofits, etc. And you mentioned like relationships being built in those spaces, and I totally resonate. Like I could pick out stories all day long about students, and I guess I'm wondering, like, do you think it's that the soil for those relationships like must happen outside of school, like those unique kind of relationships, or could these things happen from a jumping point of the classroom? I know they do all over, but do you think like there's something about outside of the classroom and those relationships that's different?
Yeah, it's a really good question too. I mean, I think for me, as my work developed and my teaching developed, I mean, one thing that developed as well is like, for lack of a better word, kind of boundaries, and social boundaries too, just being respectful of people's space as students and as learners, versus, free choice in a different context, so to speak. So I never felt totally good, well, let me just put it this way. Like one of the first things when I started working with teens at the Art Center was I wanted to ask them what they wanted to do, right? And they were all like, we want to do a lock-in. And I'm like, all right, let's do a lock-in. And then I went in and I Googled lock-in because I didn't know what a lock-in was. So I was like, what the hell's that? I was like, oh, I got to be here all night long. And they ended up it was an amazing experience. I did it for years. But what it ended up doing is like pointing to the importance of giving people the opportunity to decide their own, and that intrinsic connection really, I think, helped them see beyond the idea of a top-down instruction, right? It also, on the flip side, helped me realize there are consequences from opening those things up that don't fit into a traditional learning environment. So, we had to develop, as a result of some of those lock-ins, our youth policies for Hyde Park Art Center, how we work with teens, how we protect teens, how we protect ourselves. And that was a document that we had to develop as a staff and a team from scratch because nobody else was really doing it. I remember I called up Marwin. I was like, hey, what do you guys got going on now? Do you have any youth policies? And they sent me what I had written when I was there. I was like, no, this is not that. I know that wasn't good. But we worked with people like Marwin and others around the city to develop like a framework for how you can work with teens, which we can carry to this day. All of our teaching artists and staff have to be trained in our youth policies to work with teens. So there's this double edge where it's like you want to give them the opportunities, and that's what I strive to do. But I've also learned that over time, the boundaries of having something like guidelines are critical too, because you have to be able to respect everyone's space. And that push and pull has been, early on, I love the freedom of just like the nimbleness of just doing stuff, but then eventually swung the other way and be like, oh, I need to stop doing all this. And now I'd say I'm someone in the middle. And I think it resonates with teens and students to have their own unique intrinsic voice come out. And that, for me, I think I've developed relationships with people because I've reached those moments with them. And for one reason or another, it's reciprocal. It's not just like they're like, oh, you're this person I look up to and blah, blah, blah. It's also, I look up to them. And now it's like some of these old former students who are colleagues of mine now. I call them colleagues, and I learn from them as much as the other way around.
Yeah. I mean, I do it, to the point about identity. Like once you're in the classroom, these are pretty firm identities that like I am a teacher. And I think like, again, like there are extraordinary teachers in every city and everything like that. But there's something about the formal identities that kind of gets in the way of magical moments sometimes. But yeah, I actually have to jump to a call too, but you're fascinating, Mike. I could listen to you all day.
No worries,
so
no worries. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining. Thanks for your time.
Yes, I'll officially close us out here. Thank you so much, Mike, for joining us today. This was all very relevant, and it was so inspiring to see how long you've been doing this work and elevating people's voices. It was just magical and so neat to see all of the projects. Well, not all of them, but several of the projects that you've worked on. And we just thank you for sharing that with us. So thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining. And we hope to see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Mike.
Erin.
So good to
Thanks,
see you.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.